The 2023 season of Formula 1 is proving to be a difficult one for Mercedes, as we saw in the recent Miami Grand Prix with disappointing qualifying results of 13th and 6th, followed by a slight improvement in the race to finish 4th and 6th. It's clear that the team is struggling to keep up with the pace of the Red Bulls and Alonso, but it wasn't always like this. At the third race of the season in Australia, Mercedes were almost in the fight for the win, and the team was feeling positive. So what went wrong? To understand Mercedes' inconsistency, we need to take a closer look at each race and their ranking. While the team may have shown flashes of promise, they have also had their fair share of setbacks. But is all hope lost? At the start of the season, Mercedes suffered a significant setback during the first race in Bahrain. This was considered to be one of the lowest points in the team's history, and it served as a major wake-up call for the team. Unfortunately, the weekend proved to be even worse than they had expected, and it became clear that the car concept that they had decided to stick with after 2022 was completely incorrect. Despite finishing 5th and 7th in the race, the fact that Mercedes simply didn't have the pace of the Ferraris, Aston Martins and obviously Red Bulls was a cause for concern. Toto Wolff even went so far as to call Sunday one of the worst days in racing ever. These disappointing results prompted an admission of failure from the team, and they realised that they needed to make significant changes to get back on track. The team knew that they needed to act fast, as they couldn't afford to continue losing ground to their competitors. In the end, Bahrain served as a serious wake-up call for Mercedes, and it became clear that change was necessary. The team had to swallow their pride and admit their initial car concept had been a mistake. However, by recognising their failures and making the necessary changes, Mercedes showed that they are a team that can adapt and overcome adversity. Now, a couple weeks after their disappointing showing in Bahrain, Mercedes returned to the track for round 2 in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. But while the team was still reeling from their earlier setback, they were now moving in the right direction. They had realised that their car design was completely wrong, and they were determined to make the necessary improvements. And come the race in Jeddah, it was an improvement for Mercedes. They finished 4th and 5th behind the 2 Red Bulls and Fernando Alonso, showing clear pace over Ferrari. This was a significant jump in performance compared to the previous outing. George Russell was impressed with the progress that Mercedes had made in the 2 weeks between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and he even went so far as to say that the team made more meaningful progress during that time than they had throughout the entire winter break. All in all, Mercedes was back on track. While they still had to do a lot of catching up with the rivals, the team had shown that they were capable of making the necessary adjustments and improvements. And so a couple of weeks after the race in Saudi Arabia, the Formula 1 teams headed to Australia for the next race at the famous Albert Park circuit. Mercedes was feeling hopeful going into the race given the progress they made in the previous rounds. And well, apparently the feeling back at the factory was very positive. During qualifying, Mercedes was very competitive, finishing 2nd and 3rd on the grid. George Russell qualified in 2nd place, only 2/10 off Max Verstappen's pole position time. This was a significant improvement compared to the gap in Bahrain, which was over 0.6 of a second. In the race, Verstappen once again proved to be the fastest driver, and he went on to take victory. However, the most encouraging thing for Mercedes was that they were clear of Aston Martin and Ferrari on genuine pace for the first time all season. This was a positive sign for the team, as it meant they now had Red Bull firmly in their sights. And with a 4-week break before the next race, Mercedes knew they had time to make progress and close the gap to their rivals. And so, after the 4-week break, the Formula 1 teams arrived in Azerbaijan for round 4 of the championship. However, Mercedes lacked the genuine pace they had in previous races. During the qualifying session, they finished 5th and 11th on the grid, almost a full second off the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, who claimed pole position. On Sunday, there was a slight improvement, with Mercedes finishing 6th and 8th in the Grand Prix. However, the pace they had over Ferrari and Aston Martin in Australia was completely gone, and they found themselves back at square one. Toto Wolff came out after the weekend to say that the race in Baku had exposed just how much work Mercedes needed to do, and that their performances in Jeddah and Australia were not representative. Essentially, the issue was with the high speed and long straights, where Mercedes had too much drag and couldn't produce the top speed of the Red Bull. George Russell even revealed that Mercedes ran tests without a full rear wing, but they were still slower than Red Bull in a straight line. As a result, neither driver felt comfortable in the car. This was a challenging weekend for Mercedes, and they knew they had a lot of work to do to catch up to Red Bull. They were determined to address their issues and find a way to improve their pace in time for the next race. But Mercedes' struggles continued in Miami as they faced another disappointing weekend. It was a tale of two halves for the team, with a poor showing in qualifying following a very decent recovery in the race. Lewis Hamilton qualified in 13th place, while George Russell managed to secure a 6th place starting position, but both were over a second off the pace of the front runners. In the race, however, they managed to show some pace, finishing 4th and 6th respectively, ahead of the Ferraris. Despite the promising race result, there were still concerns about the car's balance and stability, particularly in the slow and twisty final sector of the track. The team had stiffened the rear of their car to improve stability in the faster sections of the circuit, but this came at the expense of agility in the slower corners. Toto Wolff expressed his disappointment with the car's performance, labelling it worse than I ever thought it would be. It is likely that he was comparing this car's performance to that of the dominant Red Bull team, who have been leading the way in 2023. So with Mercedes now firmly behind Red Bull in the championship standings, the team faces a significant challenge in catching up and challenging for the title. It remains to be seen whether they can make significant improvements to the car and turn their season around. But for now, the team will be looking to make the most of any opportunities that come their way. So Mercedes were gaining some steam this season in 2023, showing potential as contenders for the championship against Red Bull once the bigger upgrades came. However, recent races in Baku and Miami brought them back down to earth. But the question is, why did this happen? One reason is the change in the style of the circuits. The high speed and flowing circuits of Bahrain and Jeddah suited Mercedes' characteristics, whereas circuits like Baku and Miami both have high speed and slow speed sections, requiring a good balance that Mercedes struggles with. Another factor contributing to Mercedes' difficulties is their decision to halt bringing any significant upgrades to the current car. They want to make the most of the current package before larger upgrades come at the next race in Imola and the rest of the season. However, Mercedes' issues go beyond just a lack of upgrades. As explained in the recent video, their problems are fundamental. The overall car concept they decided to stick with from 2022 into 2023 is fundamentally wrong, and has very little space for further development, whereas Red Bull's car design has shown how quick it is and how much more pace it can develop into the car. For Mercedes to truly compete and win races on merit again, they will need to rebuild their whole car. However, this process will not be quick, and it may not happen until 2024. Mercedes' issues are worrisome, and they have a lot of work to do to catch up to Red Bull. While they have been competitive at some circuits, they will need to find a solution to their fundamental issues to become consistent contenders for the championship again. However, let's not forget who Mercedes are. These guys completely dominated Formula 1 for several years, and of course, while the nature of the regulations fall more into Red Bull's favour than Mercedes, we mustn't write them off anytime soon.